Hello and welcome to Love Work Life Training Academy. This week's call is Get Paid More for What You Do. It's really interesting as people start to log in, and lots of people are logging in straight away. If you could just drop me a note just to say that you can hear me, it'd be much appreciated. And then as always, as people start to log in, what I'll do is I will start to count people out and work from there. So as always, it's a busy webinar. And it's an interesting webinar because this is a webinar that I wrote probably in the year 2000. And I wrote it purely because of the tech market coming out of Y2K, and there was a big sort of recession in the tech industry, not caused by any financial recession, just basically all projects had come to a close as of the 31st December 1999, and therefore there was not a lot for work, especially in the contract market. So we had to work on things. So I wrote this in 2000 and then used it again in 2008 and in a subsequent sort of downturn. Okay, and it's the big difference between what I would class as a really good, strong recruiter and Joe average recruiters. So as I say, let's have a quick call. Sue's on the line. Whilst we go through this, we've got Plum Personnel, TTS 24/7. We've got Change are on as well. Let's have a look at who else is on. We've got Medical Wing, we've got Tailor Made, we've got Aventus, we've got Albany, we've got PG Recruit, we've got Aventus Legal, we've got Bomb Languages, we've got Westray, we've got Intro Recruitment, we've got Hall Recruitment as well from there. We've got Impact, we've got Cherry Professionals, we've got Premier, we've got Experis, we've got Invictus. We've got the Progress, I think it says the Progress Group, the Progress Shed, sorry. Okay, First Choice Recruitment, King Recruitment, Fairways, Elite Personnel. We've got a lot of people from iCloud and Google and places like that, the usual sort of suspects that are on there from there. And then we've also got people from Fight, from Athwell, from Mason Wake, from TN, from Alliance, from Trio Associates, from Amur Recruitment, from Judge Recruitment, and that's about everyone sort of as they come flying in. So as I said, I wrote this course, and it's an interesting course because what I find when I've delivered this course, those that excel at recruitment do this and potentially a little bit more. Those that tend to fall away during hard times or tend to just average out tend to miss an awful lot of this type of information when we come to sort of look at what people could be doing and should be doing from a recruitment point of view. So I'm going to run through all of it, okay? Should take me an hour. Okay, again, as always, feel free to take notes. As always, feel free to ask any questions. You've got a Q&A box, you've got a chat box up there. So if you want to ask anything, feel free to ask anything along the way. So very simple, get paid more for what you do. It's all about, are you in control of your desk? Do you understand what your desk actually is all about? And do you understand how you can make more money from your desk? So the objectives of this course are very straightforward, okay? There's a mountain that you must climb. We need to evaluate what you're working, grade your job specifications. What does your client base look like? Look at your recruitment life cycle, expectations, daily planning, and then I'm going to give 7 recruitment tips, okay, that I think all good recruiters need to follow. So the first thing I always look at is the mountain that we must climb. And whether you're a manager, whether you're a recruiter, whether you're just, at the bottom of the rung, okay, everyone's got to start to think about this mountain, okay? In the last 3 months, you might have had something that's lifted the lid on your own working modus operandi or whatever it be. And it all boils back to this, okay? The simple way that we view our mountain and what's going on. The mountain's based in certain layers, okay? The bottom of our layer is that basic training, our product knowledge, our ability to talk to clients and talk to candidates, our ability to find a market and create a marketplace. And it's interesting that basic training is what it actually is. It's about understanding the basics of recruitment. And what I tend to find is that a lot of people tend to skip large parts of the basics and then try to put more advanced recruitment processes on top of that and then fail. They fail because their basics aren't strong enough to hold their commitment and hold their skill levels that they're looking for. So when we start coming back as we are now, understand your basics and understand your product and get your product really, really defined and your knowledge of that product defined even more so. The next thing, are you a team member? Are you allowed to operate 100% of your time on your own? Which is a really interesting thing as a mountain that you must climb. As you come out from that sort of basic training where you've been probably handheld by a senior consultant or by a manager, etc., do they allow you to go off and do 100% work on your own? Do they allow you to operate with freedom? Do they allow you to actually become a genuine team member where you're not being held, you're not the new person? Okay, and it's interesting when I start to people who maybe have 3, 4, 5, 6 years worth of experience, some people still feel like they're being held back by their manager or being restrained by their manager or other people in the business. They're not allowed to operate freely. So it's interesting what the psyche that does to some certain people. So you've got to think about that. The next thing we look at, are you a valid member of your team? Are you listened to? And it's a really interesting thing. Are you listened to? It's interesting that if you came out with something, and I talk an awful lot about how to make the boat go faster. If you as a recruiter came to me as I was your manager and told me a different way of potentially doing something that could make something go faster, my job as a manager is to investigate that. My job as a manager is to find out whether that is true and whether it can make the boat go faster. Because if it can, then we should adopt it. So if you feel that you're not valued as a team member, it's interesting when you start to look at how you then put things into your own working modus operandi, it tends to be a little bit slapdash. So if you're a team member and you feel valued, you feel listened to, you give more back to the team, and therefore your team grows. And therefore your team becomes stronger because you start to trial things that make the boat go faster, make your recruitment service more streamlined. And it's those type of things that start to create a really good opportunity for people. Once you get beyond that point, that's all about then getting promotion. And it's interesting when we start to talk about promotions, and I've seen quite a few promotions flying around just recently on LinkedIn, and that's great. But to me, promotion is very simple. Once you're promoted, okay, where do you start again? You start right down back at the bottom here, back at basic training, back at product knowledge, back at knowing and understanding your targets. Because if you come halfway up this mountain, guess what? You start to get mountain sickness because every mountain starts to get bigger as we start to go through the recruitment process. As you start to grow your recruitment career, the mountain gets bigger, the targets get bigger, the opportunity to open more clients becomes more needed, and therefore your skills need to be better. So every time we get promoted, we go back to the basics, redefine out what we need, and retrain on the basics that we need to deliver further up the line. So it's important because this is the basis that we're going to grow our career on. So then as we move forward, we need to evaluate our work. And we talk about this constantly, about evaluating work. And over the last 25 weeks, I think this is week 25 to week 26, I can't remember nowadays, okay, evaluating the work is really important. And I always talk about time versus money. The dots here or the blobs here are client bases. As you can see, there's access for money and an access for time. And we talked about this an awful lot. If you're working in this top corner up here, okay, what we're going to find is that we're going to find that it's low time invested and they make high profit. Okay, so these clients that might bill only once or twice from us, these clients up here, they might only bill once or twice. Okay, and it's interesting. What else can we get from this client? What else do we know from this client from there? In the bottom corner, we've got low time invested and low profits. Anything on this line here, if you can see my cursor moving up and down, anything on this line here is starting to tell me that this line is a line where we make little profit. So if I start to sort of see if I can draw on here, okay, if I start to look at this and start to look at my, see if I can get a highlighter pen. Yes, I can. Okay. So if I start to look at this line here, okay, this is the line where clients tend to hover quite an awful lot, and consultants tend to work with these clients an awful lot, because these are time where we spend an awful lot of time but we make very little profit. So we've got to start to think about what goes on. We want to start working to here, okay? But lots of clients work to here, and these are clients where we spend a high time investment again, but we make low profit. And I tend to find when I look at these clients, these are all major blue chip clients that consultants try to work with, but they're not getting through the door. And yet we're investing far much more time than maybe clients up here that we should be working with, okay, or could be working with, okay, and they could make us more money, because we don't really understand what this client is. Just because this has got a big blue chip name, we're intent on trying to break this door down. So really what we want to be aiming for is the clients up here. Any client sort of in this area now, okay, is where we can make high profit and spend a lot of time invested in those people. And we've got to start to think about which clients in this area, okay, can we move around. So there's lots of lines on there that we're starting to look, but the real interesting thing is if we move all our clients towards this area, these are our cash cows, we start to make money. These are our cash calves, and what can we do to get there? So can we start to eject some of these clients here along this line? Can we start to develop some of these clients along this line to move forward? But once we know which those clients are, and we know how much time we invest with those clients and how much money we make from those clients, then we can start to put a process together that says how much time we should invest with working with those clients. So let's move forward. The next thing I always sort of look at is grading job specifications. And this is a really simple thing to look at and a really simple thing to understand. However, this is where consultants, and if you're a consultant on here and you listen to this comment, if the cap fits, wear it, you need to do something about it. This is where consultants tend to hide behind poorly qualified jobs. This is where consultants tend to hide behind roles that they know deep down they're never going to fill. And I used to do this with my consultants when they used to demand they used to work this role or work a role, or they wanted a resourcer to work these type of roles. I would take the role off them and say, okay, you can't work this role during the day. What I want you to do is find a better job. And I usually get a bit of kickback. And I said, what I'd like you to do though is work this role at 5 o'clock. And then you can work the role as much as you like. And what I tend to find then was at 5 o'clock, the person's walking out the door and leaving the business and asking, I thought you had that really urgent role on. And you suddenly realize, and they know that it's not urgent because they don't invest or won't invest their own time to actually work their role. So you need to start to grade your jobs. And I always used a grading system between 1 and 10, 1 being poor, 10 being the best job ever. And I'd only work jobs that were graded 8 and above. And I'd grade myself on, I would want an exclusive retained requirement, and that would be my 10. I would then want a good retained requirement that has exclusivity in there, but maybe I'm struggling to find candidates. My 8 would be, I am looking at a job that is, to me, exclusive. It's not retained, it's exclusive. And therefore, they're the jobs that I'd want to tend to work. But I'd then look at my roles that would be coming at 6 and 7. And 7 might be on that scale, that it is an exclusive job, but the likelihood of finding that person is pretty remote. 6 might be, it's a client that I'm up against 4 or 5 other agencies, and we have it exclusively. And we know we can find that. My job then is, how do I convert those 6 and 7s into 8? How do I make sure that I'm working the best jobs constantly so I don't waste time on clients who are not committed? So I sacked off clients that were 5 and below, but I didn't sack them off instantly. I started to investigate why they were 5 and below, so I could then go back to them and talk to them about why I'm unlikely to work this job and why I believe they were unlikely to get paid, or why they were unlikely to fulfill this need. So there's too many agents out there working roles that are 5 and less. Really hard to find. And what makes it worse, some consultants with resources would give the 5 and less roles to the resourcer to work so they can work the good jobs so it makes them look good. To me, if I had a resourcer, I would always have my resourcer working my easiest jobs to find so they can fill those jobs. I then chose whether or not I would take the hard jobs on to fill or whether I'd find better clients and better jobs to work. And what I tended to do was find better clients and better jobs to work. So I build a base of clients who are equally committed to me as I am to them. And it is all about commitment. So if we want to start to make money, we've got to start to work jobs that we are committed on. So what does your client base actually start to look like? How fragile is your client base? And I'm sure over the last 5 months, we've started to understand how fragile our client base is. But do you know your clients as well as you thought you did? Have you ever started to think about what you truly know about your client and how you can actually help them? So I start to think about my client base. And as we start to come out now, there is a window of opportunity at this moment in time. As the kids go back to school, there is a window of opportunity between now and trust me, there will be a second wave that comes and the second wave that comes. Now, whether we go there into local lockdown or national lockdown again, etc., there will be a second wave that comes. And we expect that, listening to all the statisticians out there, to happen in about 2 months' time. So there's a 2 months window now to really build and build big. So how many buying clients do you have? So when you analyze your business, do you know how many buying clients that you actually have? Do you know how much they buy from you? Do you know what they buy from you? Do you know how you can grow that and grow that opportunity? Do you then look at how many prospect clients that you've had? And by prospects, that could be a lapsed client, a client that's no longer billing with us. It could be a client that maybe only placed once in. It could be a client that we've had lots and lots of discussions with, but we've never pushed them over the line. What prospect clients have you got? And how do you grade those prospect clients to make sure you're canvassing the right client constantly and you're speaking to clients constantly? How many clients do you have requirements with? This is really interesting. How many clients do you constantly work with and you have requirements with? We go back to look at that graph, start to look at where we're making money and where we're wasting our time. Now we can start to put our clients on that graph. And I can start to see whether this is an urgent client or whether this is a not urgent client. And what requirements am I working? Am I working the urgent ones or not? How many clients have you had interviews with? And that's a really interesting one. I'd start to go back over the last 12 months and start to look at all the clients that I've had lots of regular interviews with. Irrespective whether they're buying at the moment or they're a prospect at the moment, we need to be going back to these clients now and talking to them about the potential of what they're doing as they come out of lockdown. Because these clients where we've had interviews with trust us. They trust us to find good candidates because we've already created interviews there, irrespective of whether they're placed there or not. So get hold of these clients and talk to them. We need to now start to understand how many clients do you need to reach your goal. So as a consultant, what is your target? How many clients do you need? And how many clients do you need to canvass each month to make sure you hit your goals and hit your targets? And we're going to talk about this later on, but it's important that you understand that. It's also important that you understand how many interviews per month you need on average to make your target. So if you can start to drill into those type of things, then we start to understand the type of market that we're in. You can start to understand how much work you need to do now to get back to where you were before lockdown and then move forward. And the question that I've asked and had answered and worked with lots of clients over the last 5 months is, if your biggest client stopped recruiting today, how do you replace it? I remember having this conversation probably about this time last year with a client, and they quite literally laughed in my face and said, well, yeah, they're a big client, they're a big blue chip, they're never going to stop recruiting, you know, we've got a 3-year contract with them, etc., etc., etc. And we worked out that 75%, or around about 75% of their business came from that one client. And I said how precarious that position was. We put into play a strategy that would bring more new clients into the business. In April, the same client rang me up and thanked me, because their big client guess what? Stopped recruiting because of COVID. They locked down because of COVID, and they stopped all work, and they still have yet to put any work out to other agencies or to any agencies. However, over that period of time, we opened lots of new clients and reduced that client's reliance at 75% on that one client. We had it just below the 50% mark, and it was heading further south as well. It wasn't because they weren't doing less business, it's because we were now doing more business in more new clients. We started to replace that client with better, more business. We made our business more solid because we weren't so reliant on that one client. So if your big client has stopped recruiting, you've got to start to look at your buying clients and how many clients you have and your prospect clients. What can you do? And so the question is, which clients will buy from you in the next 4 weeks? Do you know who they are? Have you been speaking to them? Have you been courting them? Have you been giving them a service that their other agencies haven't been given? What do you know about that? So we start to look at our client base. We start to look really hard at our client base. I always start to think about one thing. So I've got a little hair in my mouth. Okay, I start to think about one thing, and I start to look at my client base in a very simple way. Okay, I start to look at the funnel, and everyone talks about creating a funnel. You've got clients in your funnel, and the big blue clients are the clients that potentially might buy from you in the next 3 months. Then you've got a smaller circle there of clients, okay, and then you've got the smaller clients. Those small clients are the ones that actually will buy from you. And I always think away, and it always reminds when I talk about funnels and I talk about people constantly trying to work with clients, Pink Floyd always rings in my head, ticking away the moments that make up a dull day. You fritter and waste the hours in an offhand way. And I always think about that, and I think about consultants that are working jobs that they are never going to fill. So I always think when we start to put clients into a funnel, we properly put clients into a funnel, we need to work really hard to make sure the clients that get to the bottom of that funnel are more than before. We've got to start to think about what we do. We've got to start to think about our requirements. How many requirements to CVs? Okay, so how many CVs requirements do we send out? Then start to look at CVs. How many CVs to interviews do I need? Okay, I look to interviews to offer, and I look to requirements to placements. And I look at all that data, and I start to look at my client base, and I start to think, all right, well, how many clients do I need to actually make a placement? How many CVs do I need to fulfill that requirement, etc. And I start to look at this. Okay, and I start to look at 20% of the jobs worked equals 80% of our profit. That is the standard in recruitment. That means 80% of your jobs work only creates 20% of your profit. 80% of your time only creates 20% of your profit. So the comment is, why aren't we going back to that 20% that creates 80% of our profit and looking for more clients that look like that? Clients that are fully committed. We have a known candidate database that fills those clients. Where the 8%, the jobs usually lack commitment. The jobs requirements, new candidate generations. We've got to find the candidates. We've got to reinvent the wheel constantly. They're poor quality of jobs, i.e. they are lower than an 8, okay? And they're the largest number of jobs that we tend to work. So we've got to start to think that if my client base starts to tip in that way, I've got to do something about it. I've got to change things constantly. So I've got to start to think that my client base needs to look in a slightly different manner. Okay? We talk about diversifying in recruitment, and we talk about diversifying into different marketplaces. Okay? But before we start to diversify, what we've got to do is understand our marketplace. And we've got to then start to understand our clients. And I did this religiously, constantly, probably every 3 months. Okay? And I looked for my 20% clients where I made 8% of my business. And that became my primary objective, to find clients that looked like that. So this was my view. I'd look at type A, type B, type C, type D clients, okay? And these are the requirements that I worked. So I looked at the requirements, now not looking at the clients. I know what clients were. So the type A job, type B job, type C, type D job. I looked at the percentage of those worked. So what's the percentage of my total jobs worked were in A? So if I worked 100 jobs in a year and 80 were in type A, then I know that was 80%. I'd then look at the percentage of placed, percentage profit, percentage average per deal, matching candidates on my CRM. And I do this for each client, for each type of job, sorry. And what I'd start to understand is that sometimes the jobs that I work most produce the least profit. And so I start to think, well, if my client type job A, I was working 70% of the time, but I was only filling 25% of them. But in type C, let's say that was a 10% job, but I was filling 90% of those jobs. I'd start to think, well, why aren't I looking for more clients like type C, where naturally our tendency is to look at type A, we're getting lots of jobs from those clients, so let's find more clients like that, but they're not very profitable. So I tend to find the clients where I make my most profit, my most percentage placed out of compared to the jobs worked. And once I understood that, what I started to create then was a funnel of ongoing placements. And I had clients that all looked the same with the same type of job, which means I had candidates that looked like the same, which means me as a consultant, I was constantly going to be making placements. And that meant I was working in that true niche. And I boiled that down. But what I also did then was sack the clients off that weren't working, that weren't bringing things to me. So I then started to think, there are two cycles in recruitment. And I had to work these two cycles constantly to make sure I was always at my best. And the cycles are very simple. No requirements to work and requirements to work. And this is where I started to understand the feast and famine that happens in recruitment. It happens in the contract market, and it certainly happens in the permanent market. Feast and famine happens all the time, where you have lots of requirements to work and you're placing lots of candidates. Then all of a sudden you have zero requirements to work, so you stop placing, and your sales goes up and down, up and down. So when you've no requirements to work, you need to start to lead generate. You need to find really good A or B leads, reference, and referrals. You need to then do lots of lead conversion, business development, okay? Reference calls, generic calls, sellbacks, spec CVs, whatever it be. We need to be doing lots of lead conversion, business development, develop your business. We need to be in there constantly driving that. We then need to start to look at the simple things that we've got, things such as patch building. And by patch building, I'll be looking at market maps. I'd be looking at my target clients, permanent contract. I'd be looking at candidate generation constantly. So I'd constantly be building my marketplace, and I'd be looking at those things that we've just talked about in the last two slides constantly to make sure that I wasn't wasting my time. And I was replacing clients that were wasting my time, or clients that would never come to fruition. I would then look at candidate marketing. I'd look at clients that I was targeting. Do I have candidates that fit that bill? But then I start to think about requirements to work, okay? So I'd be taking on requirements, and I'd have to flex that specification. I'd be then vetting candidates and resourcing. But whilst I was vetting candidates and resourcing, guess what I was doing? I was lead generating, A and B leads, references and referrals. Lazy recruiters tend to skip that part. They vet the candidate and that is it. They don't do any resourcing whatsoever, any lead generation, whatsoever. I would then shortlist my candidates. And when shortlist my candidates, I would pre-close my candidates. And that way, again, I was generating more leads, more references, and more referrals. I'd look for candidate and client feedback constantly. So again, I could look at the specification that I was working. Is it a genuine grade 8 and above, or is it below? Am I, selling myself short here on the type of job that I'm working? I would then start to look at my interview process. I'd have a pre-interview prep, okay, where I would pre-close the client and the candidate. Post-interview feedback, again, I would pre-close my client and my candidate, and then I'd gather interview process that flex that spec again if I lose. If I was looking at a pre-offer, very simple. The pre-offer stage, a pre-close, and then I would offer my candidate. And they are the two views of recruitment. But to stop that boom and bust, I had to constantly canvas during this period. So if I wasn't canvassing during that period, then what would happen during the day? So again, we're going to talk about this a little bit later on. These two cycles of recruitment are very, very intertwined. But if you take them separately, what you find, you then get boom, boom and bust. But if you intertwine them and start to do resourcing, start to do canvas calls, etc., during through that time, then you start to find that you are in a better position. And that's when I start to look at doing health checks on my business. And what I start to do is health checks on my on my consultants working for me, because I was already checking myself, so I wanted to see what they were doing as well. And so I used this method constantly. And this is a very interesting and very simple method to use. This is the circle of recruitment. And as you can see in the circle at the top, there's lead generation, lead conversion, market mapping, resourcing, spec CVs, requirement control, interview, closing, after placement care, and call times. And I'd get people to mark what, on a scale of 1 to 10, they thought their skills were. And once they marked it, then I'd draw a line in between each dot. So I'd be starting to look at this and I'd be thinking, right, okay, I've got a dot here, I've got a dot here, I've got a dot here, here, and I'd be starting putting that. And eventually what I'd be able to do is draw these dots together and start to look at what my health check of recruitment looked like. And I could start to see what my health looked like. And what I could tend to find is that there were gaps here. Everything inside here is what makes me money. Everything that's outside this yellow line starts to lose me money. So I start to think here, actually, my requirement control is really poor. That's losing me money. How do I then extend this out this way to start to improve my position? And so I do a health check constantly and look at these things. Now, these things are, old school recruitment methodology. However, in new school methodology, lead conversion is your business development. Market mapping is knowing your market. Resourcing is building your candidate database. Getting CVs to the right candidates, clients is important. Having that requirement control is ultimate. Interview control, closing, and that aftercare is really important. And I always put call times down. The reason why I always put call times down is not because I'm old school, because I believe there is a place for marketing. I believe there's a place for email campaigns, etc. But this is recruitment. It's a human interaction. The more time you spend on the phone speaking to the right type of clients and the right type of candidates, the more opportunities you create and the more placements that you will make. And I can guarantee you, when I walk into a recruitment office, I can look around the office and within 10 minutes, I'll be able to tell the business owner of that office who potentially will be the biggest biller in the office. 9 times out of 10, I'm right. And why? Because that person is the person that's on the phone. That's the person that's busy doing things on the phone. That person isn't sat there doing nothing or emailing or what have you. They are talking to their clients and they are talking to their candidates. And that way they're getting more out of their marketplace than others. So the optimum thing is your engine running at its optimum? It's a really interesting view that, are you running at your optimum speed? So are you working jobs versus canvassing? Or is it resourcing versus lead generation? Is it internet versus calling? Is it working and developing the most lucrative marketplaces? So the question was always, can you build a client base, a candidate pool, resource, canvas and lead generate all at the same time? And the simple answer is, yes, you can. You just need to be very processed to do that. You need to put a process in place. Now, I'm not saying that everybody is the most processed person, and you don't have to be the most processed person. If you put processes in place that make you do these type of things, and you do them religiously, it becomes habit. And once it becomes habit, then it's hard to break. So we've got to start to think that if you are taking shortcuts, what you're actually doing is cutting yourself short. What you're actually doing is stopping yourself earning money. So is your engine running to the optimum? If you start to take one thing out of that, if you took lead generation out of that, then your optimum engine isn't running to its optimum. If you took working jobs out of that, you're in big trouble, etc. So we've got to start to think about what we put into our engine means what we come out, but how we maintain that engine is really important. So training and development becomes more so important. So if you've got a weakness, how do you improve that weakness? So to plan each day is really important. Plan each day. So I would always write a to-do list, set goals. And I actually changed that halfway through when we did this in 2008 to a success list. Because what I found was people were writing lots and lots and lots of to-dos. And what they would have is they'd have 15 to-dos. I've got to do all these things today. And they get swamped by all of those things. So I changed that to a success list. What things do they want to succeed at that day? And that list became shorter. But what I tend to find when they were focusing then on the success, they hit more goals. Review it hourly. Review your plan constantly and make changes, because the day changes. Things change during the day. Review and change. Adapt. I always said book a meeting with yourself. And it was always quite an interesting one when people said, what do you mean book a meeting with yourself? Even as a salesperson, when I was selling, or as a manager, I booked a meeting with myself almost every day, an hour where I would do something that was for me. Now, whether that be I had to do some canvas work, or I had to do some interview prep, or I had to do some whatever it be, I would do that in my hour. I would switch off my mobile. I would switch off the internet, and I would go away and do those things where I wasn't interrupted. So I had an absolute focus, okay? I'd address problems instantly, but I'd prioritize those problems. Some of those problems could be that I would say, thank you, Mr. Client, I can park that, I'll come back to you at a certain time. But if it was important, then I would address it there and then. And I would take breaks to refresh quite often. Quite often I'd quite happily say, I'm just going for a 5-minute walk, have a wander outside, walk around, okay, get a nice breath of fresh air, okay, what have you. Now, it's quite interesting that you have those that smoke and those that don't. Those that smoke go out and have a nice break at some time. Those that don't smoke tend to flog away at their desk, okay? But I was never a smoker, so I would go out and I would take a nice break, a nice refreshing break, clear my mind, come back in. I would make notes of all my wins, how I'd won it, what I'd done to do that, okay? So I could start to repeat those wins and remodel those wins, okay? And I review my day when it finished, okay? I wanted to know what was going on. So I may have a day where I'm thinking, actually, today's not been very good. But actually, when I looked at my wins, actually, I've had quite a number of wins that I hadn't thought about. So I'd do that. And obviously, before I go, I'd always write my to-do list. So as we flip then into 7 tips of recruitment, this was a challenge that was put to me probably in week 2 of lockdown, that I was told by a certain consultant that I couldn't teach them something new. So just in case, the tips are all in Latin, okay? So the tips are in Latin just so you can learn something new. So Carpe Diem is seize the day, obviously. Most people know that from their simple Latin, okay? So I used to seize the day, and I used to think this, and I live my life by this. Every day, expect to win. So I'd expect to win every day. So I'd focus on developing the activities that would make me money. I'd focus on the things that I thought I could be successful at. So I'd want to make an opportunity for myself every day to have a win. I'd try my best every day to beat the performance of yesterday. So if I had a day where I'd made 2 or 3 placements, the following day I know was going to be a really hard day to beat those 2 or 3 placements, especially if I didn't have interviews on or etc. like that. But I'd try and beat that performance. I'd try and beat what it is, because what I'd look at was if it can be measured, it can be improved. That means each day I started at a different level. So I could have had a great day where I've started here. The following day I'm starting here, but I actually finished here. So the next day I start here. And then I can start to build back up again. So I always then had a 24-hour window that I'd be measuring myself and looking at how I could improve my performance. I would know what success looks like, and I would copy it. If I saw people being successful in the office, I would copy it. If I'd looked what people were doing and I thought that could work for me, I would copy it. I would then tailor it to my needs. So as a successful recruiter, okay, I thought, what do other people do in order to be successful? And I would look at that constantly. What are they doing that they are being successful at that I am missing? And therefore I'll be improving my day every single day. So I would come in every day with that attitude, okay? Irrespective of whether I had a bad journey to work, a bad night, etc. I got to that door. As soon as I opened the door into the office, bang, my business head was on. I was in it there to win, to seize the day. Second tip, Doctrina, okay? To learn. And this is the big thing, okay? Learn something new every day. I don't care how old you are, how long you've been in recruitment, every dog can learn new tricks. And therefore, we need to make sure that we learn something new every day that can improve our performance, whether that be read a book, watch a video, okay, go on the academies like these, okay, but do something to build your strengths, okay? If you come on here and you don't learn one single thing or have something jogged in your memory that you've maybe stopped doing and should be doing, then you must be the perfect recruiter. And if you're the perfect recruiter, okay, you must be billing in the millions, okay? I've only ever met 4 people that build over $1 million in new business. So they are very few and far between. So everybody has something to learn. Be a sponge, okay? Listen to the best recruiters make calls. Copy what they do, okay? But the big thing, as always, and this is as a recruiter or as a manager, very, very simple. Learn from your mistakes. Mistakes are good if you learn from them. It helps you manage your weakness. Too many people get measured by their mistakes, but never get told how to actually mend those mistakes or improve them. So if you keep making the same mistake, okay, find out what that mistake is and look at how you can improve that. Speak to other recruiters, speak to your managers, speak to people within the business, speak to people outside the business, but learn from your mistakes. If you're a manager and you're on this line here, okay, think, if you've got consultants that keep making mistakes and you're not helping them correct those mistakes, then that is your mistake. Your mistake that you're not helping those recruiters unlock their potential, increase their opportunity. So making mistakes has got to be something that we can look at. And if we start to think about this, and I talk about black box thinking quite a lot, okay? The reason why, and the black box actually in a plane isn't black, I believe it's bright orange or something, but the black box was brought into the aviation industry. And it was brought in the aviation industry just after the Second World War. Why? Because air travel started to increase. And what happened was lots of airplanes were crashing at takeoff and crashing at landing. Why? Because the 3 pedals in the middle or 3 levers in the middle that your pilot pushes all look the same. So under duress or under stress, the pilot would tend to sometimes pull the wrong one. Maybe sometimes landing, rather than putting the wheels down, they've pulled the flaps down, etc. And therefore they would crash. The aviation authority realized this, and what they did, they mandated that every aircraft manufacturer changes those levers. So one is a wheel, one is a wing, and one is a brake pedal. So they're all different. So even in the dark, just by touching them, you know which lever you're pulling or pushing. So they learned from their mistakes. And that's why the aviation keeps learning from their mistakes. They find the black box and then they mandate it right across the business. So if you want to make your business go faster, if you want to make your team go faster, if you want to make your sales desk go faster, find your mistakes, correct those mistakes, and manage those weaknesses. So manage your weaknesses is very straightforward. So tip number 3, okay, I'm not even going to start to talk about that, okay, but tip number 3 is very simple: plan your day. We've suddenly learnt that you'll not succeed between 9 to 5 because candidates are now working a very different hour. Candidates work from home, candidates are working in the office, etc., etc. So that means calling from 7:30 to 9 o'clock is a prime time, okay? From 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. is a prime time to get hold of candidates. So you need to plan your day around that. If you're working from home or if you're working in the office, okay, think, is there flexibility with your manager to maybe create something like that? Okay, think about the flexibility, because things have changed when we need to plan our day. Okay, make yourself available to your clients 24/7. Really important that you make yourself available to your clients, because clients, again, are working from home quite an awful lot now. So we've got to make sure that you can contact them and they can contact you. Break your day into sectors. Okay, and this is when we talked about finding time to do the right things, making sure we're constantly doing the right things. So every day I'd have a sector that said candidate calls. Now, whether that be calls for candidates for about a job, or calls just to fulfill my number of candidates that I need to register that day or interview that day, that's what I'd be doing. I then have another sector in that day for recruitment calls, and that'd be about interviews, chasing CVs, filling up in a job specification, etc. So I'll be looking after my business. I then have business development calls. I'll be starting to look at what business calls I need to make sure that I'm doing the right things constantly to bring new requirements in. So every day I'd have those things. I'd have administration time. I'd plan administration time, generally outside my core selling hours, but I'd have administration time when I do the things that I needed to do. I wouldn't break off during one of those other three sectors to do administration, because those three sectors are core. I'd have market development activities, whether that be internet marketing, whether that be sending stuff out on LinkedIn, whatever it be, I'd be doing my market development activities. So they were the things that I would constantly do every single day to make sure I never had that boom and bust cycle going on. To focus your activities on the areas that make you money. We've got to make sure that we don't spend time trying to convince the inconvincibles. And what I mean by that is there are many clients that we spend so much time courting and pushing and trying to get something from them. And guess what? They never give us anything. They never give us any work. We're just wasting our time. So why try convince that client? And the biggest person that you need to convince is yourself. And I hear this an awful lot, and I've heard it since 1992. Okay, they're my client. I will eventually break into that client. Then a year later, that's the same consultant. You're still talking to that client. Yes, they're my client. I'll eventually break into that client. Well, I've got news for you. For whatever reason, that client, that consultant will never break into. It might be they might not like the voice, the tone of voice, the company that they're calling from, whatever it be, they just don't like that person. So get someone else calling it. You need to convince yourself that not every client is going to buy from you. Therefore, drop certain clients, get rid of certain clients. Okay, convince yourself first that you're trying to call a client that is not going to be convinced about your recruitment process and your service. How many clients do you talk about where we maybe look at our client base and say, right, we get an awful lot of jobs from these clients, but we only fill about 20% of these jobs. And why? Because you can't convince them to change their recruitment process that is obviously at fault, because they believe their recruitment process or their recruitment methodology is right. So you're trying to convince the inconvincibles to improve your lot. If you can't improve it, move on, find something better. Okay. So this is where Latin becomes a bit more modern, okay, because this is all about technology. This is all about using technology. We have to embrace technology. Technology can give us great things nowadays. Your CRM should be your first part of call. It should be a live and breathing CRM first environment. If you've got candidates and clients on your CRM and you've sorted those candidates and clients properly, when you come to match candidates to jobs and clients to candidates, it should be a really, really switch on process. It shouldn't take you very long, which means your speed to recruitment should be very, very quick. Okay, so you need to keep your data quality high, relevant and fresh. And if you look after your CRM will look after you. If you constantly go out into the marketplace to advertise a job and forget your CRM, the stat apparently is that 6 out of 10 placements made last year were candidates who were already on the agency's database, but they paid from a job board. Wow, how much money could you save, but how much time could you save? So we've got to start to think about marketing to our candidates on our candidate database. So we've got to start to think. We do lots of social media marketing, excuse me, LinkedIn, AI, job boards, etc. That's all part of marketing. And we use them wisely, but not solely. Because remember, your CRM has candidates and clients that are working with you, talking to you. They know you. So use your CRM and start to actually market to the candidates and the clients on your CRM. If you start to market them to your candidates on your CRM, you start to create that little ecosystem. You start to create people who trust you. You become their trusted advisor. And when I say marketing, what I'm not talking about is sending out a job specification. That is not marketing. So learn how to market yourself on social media. You need to have an emotional attachment to the phone and to the video. Obviously, video now is taking over phone. Obviously, this is a video conference. It could have been on a call. It could be done anyhow. But if you have an emotional attachment to your phone and maximize your call sector daily, so whether it be a client call, a recruitment call, a BD call, a candidate call, maximize that time on the phone. You can only create a relationship over the phone or face-to-face or via video. It is very hard to create a relationship by sending emails, because emails can be, read in so many different ways. So don't measure your overall call time, measure the number of connection calls made per hour. So how many connections are you making per hour? How many calls are you making? And I've talked about this person before. I had the joy of meeting a guy that worked for Robert Half in America, and he was billing $2 million a year in a permanent market. Him, and he had two resources. Their single mode of operandi was very plain. They made 100 outbound calls each every day to targeted people. Didn't matter if no one picked up the call, okay? They didn't care. They made that outbound calls, and they'd worked out that if they did that, they'd make 2 million. And they billed 2 million year in, year out. So they learned how to use their technology. Okay, so immerse yourself, whether it be video technology, whether it be your CRM, whatever it be, immerse yourself in technology and become an expert in it and learn how to use it. And then very simple, we need to know our sums. And our sums are very, very simple to know. If we can understand our sums and understand what we need to know, then we can start to understand how many candidates do you need to boss your marketplace. How many new candidate registrations should you be doing a day? How many new candidates do you add to your CRM per day? We've got to keep that candidate market fresh and recycling. If you're not doing that, then there's something wrong. It means you have to reinvent the wheel every day. How many buying clients do you need to make your 2 placements plus per month, whatever it is your statement be? 2 placements, 4 placements, whatever it be. How many business calls do you need to develop that? How many new requirements do you need to acquire per week to do that? How many clients do you have to make to generate a requirement, call to generate a requirement, sorry. How many client visits should you be doing to generate all of those things? So if you start to know your stats, then you can become very, very processed, and you can start to focus. And what you tend to do is drop the calls where clients are giving you nothing. How many clients do you add to your CRM per day to keep your pipeline fresh? So if you keep rotating your clients and again, sacking clients and bringing new clients in, then you will always be fresh. You can't keep calling the same clients and expecting different results. It just doesn't happen. How many CVs do you need to send per week is very straightforward. How many CVs do you need to send per requirement? I normally use 3. How many CVs does it take to generate an interview? How many CVs does it take to generate a placement? And when we start to think about those type of things, how many candidates do you need to boss your marketplace, how many buying clients you need, how many CVs you need, become very straightforward, because they lead to a simple thing. How many interviews do you need each week to make the placements that you need? So we're now talking about simple process. The number of jobs that you need, the number of CVs out to those jobs, and the number of interviews will then start to create the number of offers you need to generate the placements that you need. If you can generate offers, you can start to generate placements. But to do that, you need to start having the cycle going on. So if I suddenly told you, if you call 25 genuine clients every single week, I can guarantee at the end of the month you'll make 2 placements, and those placements will be worth an average value, let's say the UK is something like 5.5K. Would you take me up on that? If I suddenly said, okay, we have to then just increase this by a small percentage to make that to 3, to 4, to 5, and we can start to look at the areas that we're going wrong, all of a sudden we can start to improve our standing. So we're in a real good position. So how many placements do you need to hit target? Look at your sums above and work on those sums, because then we are starting to really control our desk and control our environment. So when we start to look at what it goes in, so if it can be measured, it can be improved. Results goals lead to placements. So I always think about what I'm measuring, and I start to look at my figures that we've just talked about. The number of new jobs canvassed on per week. I want to know how many jobs it takes to make my placements. Number of new CVs sent to those jobs, and the number of new interviews booked per week. Those things will all lead to a placement. So if I start to look at those, that's what I need to sort of think about. So they're my result goals. But I also have performance goals, and these lead to requirements. How many candidates registration calls and meetings per day do I need to have? How many client business development calls per day do I need to be doing? How many candidate calls per day? How many client visits per week? How many references taken and followed up per day? How many referrals gained per day? Once I start to know those things, I know that if that's my performance goals, they will hit my results goals. If I'm hitting my results goals, I will be making placements. So I start to look at those things, and every day and every week I measure where I've been successful and where I have not. Because what I want to make sure is that I'm doing the right things constantly. And that means one thing and one thing only. This is the big difference between those that excel at recruitment and those that simply recruit. And the simple thing is, do not cut corners. Know your basics. Do not compromise on the quality of your service ever. Do not take the easy route just because it's the quickest route. Genuinely, the quickest route will lead to failure. Do not work requirements without commitment. And when we talk about grading requirements, how many requirements do we find that we work 1, 2, 3 times because the client's rejected CVs? So although we may have made a placement, how many CVs have we actually sent? How many CVs have we actually put forward to that client? How many times have I had to rework that job because we haven't had the right information in the first place? Do not submit a candidate that does not match 90% of the requirement. Again, in this marketplace, we have a very candidate-rich marketplace. Job shy to a certain degree. So that means you've got to make sure that you get the right candidate in front of your client, because otherwise there is so much more choice out there. Do not work a requirement without your terms of business have been agreed, especially in this marketplace, because in this marketplace, clients will do desperate things. And it's interesting what I've seen more and more posts about clients who've had, backdoor candidates, placed them without telling the agency, whatever it be, okay? Because we haven't had terms and conditions signed. So we need to make sure we're up there and doing the things. I always think if your gut tells you it's not right, follow it up. Don't ignore it. So if you're speaking to a candidate and you think it's not right, if you're speaking to a client, you don't think you've got everything out of it, follow it up. Your gut is genuinely a really good barometer of what's right and what's wrong. And if your gut's telling you that you're hiding behind a requirement, then step out of your comfort zone. Step out from behind that requirement and go source something better, because hope is not a strategy. And I always said this, and I was, very privileged to have this presented to me by a guy called Frank Cotton, who's a very famous rugby player. And he talks about, if it goes wrong, first look in the mirror. Because if you can't look yourself in the mirror, okay, and know the truth, then you're just lying to yourself. So look in the mirror first and foremost. If it's gone wrong, 90% of the time, it's down to you. Admit it, find out what the problem is, change that. And if you know what's looked good, then simply replicate it, okay? So cutting corners doesn't mean to say, cutting corners says basically that you stop to see what looks good. If you stop and look at something that looks good, copy it, improve it, embellish it, develop it, replicate it. Don't make a cheap, fake copy of it where you've cut corners. Make a proper copy and do it properly. So to conclude, we've got to make sure constantly through this moment in time that we are focused on development of your most lucrative market. You've got to focus on that mountain that you must climb. So that means make sure you've got the basics right. Make sure you can do 100% of what you need to do by yourself. Make sure you've got ideas and you're putting ideas into your team. Grade your requirements. Do not work anything that is below an 8. Work out your own grading system, but make sure you stick to it. Know what your client base looks like. Show me the money. Know what your clients, who's going to recruit. Know how you're going to build that client base. Know what you're going to do to have to maintain that client base constantly. Have a regular health check, an apple a day type scenario. Health check your business every day. Health check your skills every day. And that means you can seize the day. Learn little and often. Without a plan, you will get lost. And remember, technology is your friend if you use it properly. Know your sums. Data will come from your technology. It will help you increase performance because if it can be measured, it can be improved. And as we said, do not cut corners. Ladies and gents, that's it. That's how you make more money. That's what you do to make more money. You need to make sure that you are putting those things into process constantly. Now, it sounds like a lot of things in process, but most of it is common sense. And most of it is things that you already potentially know, but hide and forget and don't implement. Make sure we become rigid with these implementations, and I can guarantee you will build more money and create a better business. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've got no more questions or got any questions, feel free to ask them now. If not, thank you very much. It's been a wonderful time with you today. Much appreciated. Again, the recording will be on the website, hopefully within the next 24 hours. If you've had any questions, feel free to offer them over. If not, I'd like to wish you all a happy lunchtime, and I look forward to meeting you and seeing you all next week. Thank you very much for your time, guys.